Don't know me, I think all of you do, but if you don't, I'm Lonnie Hudson. I'm the owner along with Sue, the good-looking one in the pink back there. So, we wanted to get as many folks as was interested together and talk a little bit about early childhood education, the importance of early childhood education, and brain development. There's a lot of parents, in fact there's a lot of educators that frankly don't know how really important it is to educate children at an extremely early age. So that's kind of what we want to go talk about for a little bit. We'll start with just some basic facts and then just kind of go through. When your child was born, the instant your child was born, they started with somewhere between 100 and 150 billion brain cells. Now these brain cells are called neurons. Okay? Now the unique thing about every one of these brain cells is they were free floating. They're not connected to anything. Right? They're not connected to each other. There's not a system there. And so what ends up happening, in order to learn, your brain doesn't so much learn as it does develop. And it develops by interconnecting these brain cells together. And they do that through what's called synapses. All right? Now what ends up happening is the only way to create a synapse between one brain cell and another is to cognitively stimulate the brain cell in a particular way. If that brain cell is not properly stimulated, then that particular synapse won't generate. What most folks don't understand is that the brain develops from the bottom to the top and from the back to the front. So if you went and looked at a picture of the brain and said, okay, well what is at the very bottom and what is at the very back, that portion of the brain is the piece that takes care of balance in a child. So what's the very first thing your child did? They learned to roll over. Right? Then they learn to set up, then they learn to crawl and walk and so forth. As you go from the bottom to the top and from the back to the front, you get more and more and more involved in more and more aspects of the brain. What ends up happening is each one of those are key in that you have to develop them at a particular time in a particular way. One of the things that's kind of unique about the brain, that's an actual picture of a child's brain. Kind of ugly looking, huh? But all of these folds are what contains the neurons. And what's unique is if you were to take this brain and make it flat, it is larger than a baby blanket. That's pretty incredible to think you get that large of something and that small of a head. Okay? But it works that way. And so that's the reason you have literally billions, more than 100 billion brain cells. And so what we're looking at doing is developing those things, okay? Making them go from independently sitting here free floating to working. Now here's something that's really important. Each one of the brain cells, because they have a certain particular time in which they can develop, they have to be stimulated during that particular time. If, and here's at least in my opinion, here's the really important part. Each brain cell, neurologists have found, have a very finite time in which the development aspect can occur. In some cases, it's a matter of days. In other cases, it's a matter of up to several months. But if you go to and through that particular phase in that particular brain cell, and that brain cell is not properly stimulated, it will never get stimulated. And that child can live to literally be 100 years old, and that brain cell will never enter into the system. It will never connect. All right? Now here's the real key, and here's the crux of the entire meeting today. The importance of early childhood education. Studies have shown, multiple studies have shown that 85% of every brain cell in your child's mind will become developed or not by the time they hit their 6th birthday. All right? So from birth through age 6, 85% of every brain cell will either become capable of developing and entering into the network or not. So if we don't do a good job of doing what we're supposed to be doing in educating and training and brain development, by the time they reach 6 years old, 85% of all of their future capacity and capability is gone. That's kind of scary. Right? That's very scary. And kind of a unique thing to look at. And we'll go back up here to this in a little bit. This is This is not an artist's conception. That's actually a picture of brain cells. These are the brain cells. Those are the neurons. Okay. These are what they call dendrites. Right? And brain cells don't actually touch each other. Okay? They connect to each other through what's called a synapse, and there's just a little bitty gap between them. All right? Now, the thing that's even more scary than what I just got through saying is what do you notice about that brain cell right there? How many synapses does it have? Several. More than one. Okay? And so, look at the network there. If you have a brain cell that does not get developed, you're not missing out on one brain cell. You're missing out on one brain cell that has the capability of connecting dozens of times. So there is a multiplier effect. Understand what I'm getting at here? If you miss out on that one cell, it's not like I missed out on one cell. It's like I missed out on potentially hundreds of connections. Once the brain cell has developed to the point it can grow synapses, once it has done that, then it develops and it changes and it creates pathways. One of the explanations that we've gone through is like a transportation system. Okay, if you think about it, 200-300 years ago, when this country was just getting started, somebody started on the far east coast and went to the west coast. Well, at some point in time, they had themselves a 2 or 3 foot long machete, and they were hacking their way through underbrush and thick overgrowth and everything else. Well, when they finally managed to get from point A to point B, when they finally got through there, that was the equivalent of one brain cell connecting to another. It connected, okay, and you were able to pass. Now think with me for just a second. What happens if you don't ever go back through there again? What would happen to that pathway?
Grow over.
It'd grow over. Right? Now in the brain it doesn't grow over, but what happens is the brain forgets where to put it. It's like a lost piece of data in the computer. If you put it in a file and the computer no longer knows where it is in that file, it can't access it anymore. All right? So what do you have to do? You have to go over it again and again and again and again. Children, as all of you parents know already, children love repetition. They will drive you crazy with repetition. It's the reason they want to hear the same book read over and over and over again, even though they've got it memorized. And when you read that book and you miss a word or you change a word, it's, oh, Mommy, you messed that up. You know, it should have said this and you said that. They absolutely know it, but you know what? A child's brain knows what it needs better sometimes than we as the parents and the educators know. Repetition is massive. What we do here is an incredible amount of repetition, and there's a reason for that. Now that if you go back and forth across that trail many times, well, it went from being a hacked out trail to an animal trail, you know, to like a cow trail. Everybody's seen a cow trail. And then it goes from there to a 1-lane dirt road, and then a 2-lane gravel road. And eventually, if you do it enough, it will become like a multi-lane highway. All right? And at that point in time, you have built an incredible transportation system. That's what that is. It is a transportation system. Let me just give you an example. And nobody throw out the answer, just think it in your head. I'm going to give you 5 words, and I can just guarantee everybody in this room can give me the 6th. Mary had a little... Now all together. Mary had a little lamb. Okay? Now, was I up here singing that?
No.
Did anybody hear me humming it before? Totally out of context. We were not talking about nursery rhymes or anything else. What about this? 3 blind mice. Right? Okay? What I'm saying is, your brain, why did that work? You know, you guys aren't children anymore. Okay? So why would I be able to say 4 words and instantly you know it? I can tell you why. It's because repetition. When you were a child, you sang that, or had it sang to you, or you sang it to your child over and over and over and over again. And so the brain fires, and it 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 doesn't get to here one way. It gets here to here hundreds of ways, thousands of ways. And it builds a wider and wider and wider and wider and wider and wider transportation base. Okay? That's what happens. All right? So that is what we are trying to do with our kids, with your kids. Here's another analogy that I think works real well. There's a magazine here that you can get in Fort Bend. It's called Fort Bend Homes. Anybody seen that magazine? You can go back through as many magazines. You can stack them up this high and go back as many years as you want to, flipping through that magazine, and you know what you will not see? You will not see in that magazine an 8 by 10 glossy picture of a foundation. Why? It's not sexy enough. It's not pretty. It's an ugly piece of concrete. Okay? It just sits there. All right? But what you will find in that magazine is some absolutely beautiful homes, incredible decorations. You know, you've got these $1 million homes that are out there, and they're just beautiful. How long would that $1 million home stand if you didn't have that ugly piece of concrete sitting on the bottom? Not very long. Okay, it would crash and burn. Here's the key: are we interested in building a foundation for our kids that would house a $1 million home?
Of course.
The answer is of course, and my answer is no way. Now, why was my answer no way? What I'd like to see is an Empire State Building.
All right.
Now let's think about that for a second. If you started to build the Empire State Building on the foundation that it took to build a $1 million phenomenally beautiful home, how long would it last? Would you even get it started? Would no way you'd get it finished. It would crumble. All right? What is the difference in the ability to construct? It is the foundation. That's what we do here. Okay? And we do it through cognitive development. It is absolutely proven over and over and over and over and over again that you have to have a minimum of 3 hours of cognitive development with a child every day. If you're having less than that, brain cells are coming and going. And if the brain cell did not get stimulated within the time frame it's supposed to, it didn't die, but it may as well have, because it'll sit there and free float in the mind forever. Okay? So that's what we're trying to do here is build that. So the next question comes in a lot, and we get this question a lot. How soon is soon enough? When should we start teaching our children? When should we start educating and doing brain development?
First day of school.
Yeah. One thing that's very unique is pediatricians have tried this, and they have literally been there at the time of birth of children. Okay? And I mean, the child is born, and literally seconds after birth, the pediatrician will take the child, and they will get up within the child's field of vision. Okay? Now, the field of vision of a seconds-old child is inches. Okay? And so they're literally right here in the child's face. And what they do is they stick their tongue out, and they put it back. And they do it over and over and over again. Now, what they have found in studies, after study after study after study, is within 30 minutes, that baby is duplicating that action. That boggles your mind. Think about that with us for just a second. That child came out of a completely dark environment, obviously. There's not even flashlights in the womb, you know, they're not in there reading. Okay? And so vision has been completely unused. So the child is born, and the very first time vision becomes a part of its life is then. And so within 30 minutes, it's capable of taking and building enough neurons and enough pathways to understand what vision is. By taking that signal, converting it into an electric signal, creating it and making these pathways. And then it has to decide, how do they do that? And so it has to go figure out how to open the jaw muscles. Then it had to go figure out how to exercise the tongue muscles. And it did that in 30 minutes. The human brain is beyond belief incredible.